Man-Vampire Dracula, Chapter 11. The hunt begins. With Lucy finally laid to rest, a heavy silence settled over the group. It was not the silence of peace, but of grim understanding. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. What had once seemed like madness or superstition was now undeniable reality. Vampires were real, and Count Dracula was not alone. Professor Van Helsing gathered them together. Mina, Dr. Seward, Arthur Holmwood, and Quincy Morris. Gone were the half-truths and cautious explanations. What followed was a full revelation, spoken with clarity and urgency. He explained the nature of the enemy. A vampire was not merely a monster. It was a parasite, feeding on the living, spreading its curse, hiding behind human beauty and charm. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be cured. And once invited into a place, it could return again and again. Lucy's fate was proof enough. Van Helsing told them that Dracula had already established himself in England. The boxes of earth brought by the Demeter were not random cargo. They were resting places. Sanctuaries. Each box allowed Dracula to sleep, to recover, and to move freely across the land. If they did nothing, others would follow Lucy. Mina listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. She was no longer just an observer. She understood now that knowledge would be their strongest weapon. Where fear failed, preparation might succeed. Jonathan Harker's condition was discussed next. Word had finally reached England that Jonathan had been found, alive, but broken, after escaping Castle Dracula. He was recovering slowly, his body weakened, his mind haunted by what he had seen. His experiences would soon become vital to their understanding of the enemy. Van Helsing proposed a plan. They would track every box of earth brought from Transylvania. Each one would be found, purified, and destroyed. Without them, Dracula would be vulnerable, forced into the open, forced to flee or fight. The hunt had begun. That very night, they set out to investigate the first location. Armed with sacred symbols, determination, and growing courage, they moved through the darkness, not as victims, but as hunters. Fear still followed them, but it no longer controlled them. Lucy's death had changed everything. They now knew the cost of failure. And somewhere in the shadows of England, Count Dracula was watching, aware that his prey had finally learned how to fight back. The war between darkness and humanity had begun. Chapter 12. Dr. Seward's Diary. Dr. John Seward began recording his thoughts more carefully than ever before. As a man of science, he had always trusted observation, reason, and evidence. Yet everything he had witnessed in recent days had shattered the foundations of that belief. His diary became the only place where he could speak freely, without judgment, without disbelief. Lucy's death haunted him. He replayed every examination, every diagnosis, every decision he had made. Medicine had failed her. Science had failed her. And worse than that, science had blinded him to the truth until it was almost too late. If not for Van Helsing, Lucy's fate might never have been understood at all. Seward's thoughts frequently returned to his asylum. The institution stood close to Carfax, the very estate Count Dracula had purchased upon arriving in England. At first, the connection meant little to him. But now, every detail felt deliberate. Every coincidence felt planned. And then there was Renfield. Renfield was Seward's most troubling patient. Intelligent, articulate, and deeply disturbed. He suffered from an obsession with consuming life, believing that by eating living creatures, he could absorb their strength and vitality. Flies, spiders, birds, each life fed to him seemed to fuel his strange logic. Once, Seward had dismissed Renfield as a curiosity. Now he watched him closely. Renfield's behavior had changed since Dracula's arrival. He became agitated at night, restless and alert, as if responding to distant signals. At times, he was eerily calm, almost reverent. At others, violent and desperate. One evening, Renfield suddenly grew quiet. Too quiet. He approached Seward with an unusual clarity, speaking with purpose rather than madness. He begged to be released, claiming he needed to leave at once. His tone was urgent, fearful not for himself, but of something else. "There is danger," Renfield warned. "A great danger. I must go." Seward refused. Almost immediately, Renfield's demeanor changed. His intelligence vanished, replaced by rage and confusion. He attacked violently, forcing the staff to restrain him. Seward recorded the incident carefully, his unease growing. Renfield knew something. Later that night, Seward reviewed his notes on Lucy again. The pattern was undeniable. Blood loss, sleepwalking, night attacks, transformation. Everything aligned too perfectly with Van Helsing's explanation. Science alone was no longer enough. That realization terrified him more than any supernatural threat. As the group continued their hunt for Dracula's resting places, Seward found himself standing between two worlds, medicine and myth, logic and belief. He struggled to reconcile them, yet could no longer deny either. Renfield screamed that night, not the cries of madness, but of warning. Seward rushed to his cell, finding him clutching the bars, eyes wide with terror. "He is coming," Renfield whispered. "The master is near." Seward felt a chill run through him. Carfax lay just beyond the asylum walls, and something ancient had claimed it. That night, as Seward closed his diary, one truth became painfully clear. Dracula had not merely entered England. He had embedded himself within it, and madness, science, and the supernatural were now bound together, whether Seward believed in it or not. Chapter 13. Mina's Strength. Mina Harker had always believed that strength came from preparation. Long before fear entered her life, she had trained herself to be organized, observant, and composed. Now, surrounded by death and darkness, those qualities became more than habits. They became weapons. Jonathan had finally returned to England. When Mina first saw him, her heart broke. The man she loved was alive, but something essential had been wounded. His body was thin, his movements cautious, and his eyes carried memories he could not yet fully share. He suffered from nightmares, waking in terror, reliving the horrors of Castle Dracula. Still, Mina did not press him. She understood that healing required patience. As Jonathan slowly regained his strength, Mina began gathering every written record they possessed: journals, letters, medical notes, ship logs, asylum records. She typed them carefully, arranging events in exact order. Patterns emerged where once there had been confusion. Van Helsing watched her work in silence. He recognized what the others had not yet fully understood. Mina was not simply assisting. She was leading. Her mind connected facts with precision. She noticed timing, locations, movements. Dracula was not acting randomly. He was methodical. Every action had purpose. Every resting place, every victim, every night attack followed a structure. Mina shared her conclusions calmly. Dracula moved by night. He depended on secrecy. He required his boxes of earth to survive. Without them, he was vulnerable. Van Helsing praised her openly, something he rarely did. He spoke of her clarity, her courage, and her strength of will. In a world driven by fear and violence, Mina's greatest power was her intellect. But darkness does not tolerate resistance. As Mina grew more involved, strange changes began to occur. She grew pale and tired, despite resting. She complained of a persistent cold, even in warm rooms. At night, she experienced disturbing dreams, visions of red eyes, suffocating darkness, and a presence that felt intimately close. One morning, Van Helsing noticed something troubling. Small marks on Mina's throat, Not deep wounds. Not yet. But unmistakable. The room fell silent. Van Helsing acted immediately. He placed protective symbols around Mina, insisting she be guarded at all times. He warned the others that Dracula had chosen his next target, and this time, it was not someone weak or unaware. It was Mina. Jonathan was devastated. Guilt consumed him. He blamed himself for bringing Dracula into their lives, for allowing Mina to be exposed to danger. Mina, however, remained calm. "We will not stop now," she said firmly. "Not after Lucy. Not after everything." Her resolve strengthened the group. Yet Van Helsing made a difficult decision. To protect Mina, and to protect the mission, she would be excluded from certain activities. The knowledge pained her deeply, but she accepted it, trusting Van Helsing's judgment. Still, the damage had been done. Dracula had touched her life. The battle was no longer about stopping a monster. It was about saving Mina's soul. As night fell, and the group prepared to continue the hunt, one truth loomed above all others. Dracula had underestimated Mina Harker, and that would be his greatest mistake. Chapter 14. The Enemy Strikes Back. The hunt for Dracula's resting places had begun to show results. One by one, the boxes of Transylvanian earth were discovered and destroyed. Sacred symbols were used, rituals performed, and each corrupted refuge was rendered useless. For the first time since arriving in England, Dracula was being cornered, and he noticed. The atmosphere around the group changed. What had once felt like cautious progress now carried the weight of imminent danger. The enemy was no longer simply watching from the shadows. He was reacting, planning, preparing to strike back. Van Helsing felt it before anyone else. Dracula would not flee. He would retaliate. That night, Mina slept uneasily. Despite the protections placed around her, holy symbols, guarded rooms, constant vigilance, she sensed a presence near her. Not physically visible, but unmistakably real. It pressed against her thoughts, whispering without sound, invading the quiet corners of her mind. She woke trembling. Her heart raced, her breath shallow. She could not remember the dream clearly, only the feeling of suffocation, of being watched by eyes filled with cruel intelligence. Van Helsing was summoned at once. His examination confirmed his fear. Dracula had found a way through, not through walls or doors, but through Mina herself. The bond between Mina and Dracula had deepened. Whatever contact he had made with her before had not been broken. Instead, it had created a connection, one that allowed him to sense their movements, their plans, their intentions. They had underestimated him. Van Helsing gathered the group and spoke plainly. "As long as this connection exists," he said, "Dracula can see what we do. We must act with care, and with speed." The realization was devastating. Mina, once their greatest strength, had become a vulnerability, and yet she remained calm. She accepted the truth, without panic, without despair. "If he can see through me," she said quietly, "then perhaps I can see him as well." Van Helsing hesitated, but then nodded. It was dangerous, risky, but Mina's connection to Dracula could be turned against him. That very night, Dracula struck. Renfield was found injured, his skull fractured, his body broken against the walls of the asylum. In his final moments of clarity, he spoke of the Master's fury, of punishment for betrayal. Dracula had silenced him. The message was clear. Anyone who defied him would suffer. As dawn approached, Mina collapsed. She was weak, feverish, and shaken. The mark on her throat darkened slightly, and her strength faded. Van Helsing acted swiftly, performing protective rites and strengthening the barriers around her. But the damage was done. Dracula had drawn blood. The war had escalated. No longer content with subtle manipulation, he was now attacking openly, striking minds, bodies, and souls alike. The group understood that hesitation would mean defeat. They could not simply hunt Dracula anymore. They had to end him. As the sun rose over England, Van Helsing looked at the group with grim resolve. "The enemy has revealed himself," he said. "Now we must finish this." And somewhere, hidden from the light, Count Dracula smiled, fully aware that the final battle was approaching. Chapter 15. The final pursuit begins. By morning, there was no doubt left among them. The hunt had entered its final phase. Dracula had been wounded, not physically, but strategically. His hiding places in England were disappearing one by one. The boxes of sacred earth, once his greatest protection, were being destroyed. Each loss weakened him, forced him to move, forced him into desperation, and desperation made him dangerous. Van Helsing gathered the group once more. There was no panic in his voice now, only resolve. He explained that Dracula could no longer remain hidden in England. Without his resting places, daylight became a threat. He would be forced to flee, to return to the land where his power was strongest. Transylvania. Jonathan listened intently. As memories of his imprisonment returned, fear flickered in his eyes, but it did not control him. He knew the land, he knew the castle, and now he understood the enemy better than ever before. Mina, though weak, remained mentally sharp. Through the strange bond forced upon her, she began sensing fragments of Dracula's movement, fleeting impressions, sudden flashes of darkness and motion. Van Helsing used these moments carefully, guiding her into a light trance, allowing her to speak what she sensed without fully surrendering herself. The picture slowly became clear. Dracula was escaping. He had secured one last box of earth and arranged passage east. Time was no longer on their side. If Dracula reached his castle, his strength would return fully, and the war would begin again on his terms. They had to stop him. Before that happened, plans were drawn quickly. Routes were traced across maps. Rivers, railways, roads. Every possible escape path was studied. Van Helsing split the group strategically, ensuring Dracula would be pursued no matter which route he chose. This was no longer a defensive mission. It was a chase. As night fell, Mina sensed movement again, stronger this time. Cold water, enclosed darkness. The slow, steady rhythm of travel. Dracula was being transported. By ship, Jonathan's blood ran cold. He knew too well what it meant to be carried helplessly across distance, trapped in darkness. The idea that Dracula now occupied such a position, sealed, immobile, gave him grim satisfaction. Yet the danger remained immense. Even confined, Dracula was not powerless. His influence still reached outward. Wolves, storms, madness. These were tools he had used before, and he would use them again. Van Helsing looked at each of them in turn. "This will not be easy," he said quietly. "Some of us may not return." No one turned away. They had seen what failure cost. Lucy's fate stood as a permanent reminder. As the group prepared to depart, Mina paused, gripping Jonathan's hand. "We finish this," she said. "No matter what." Jonathan nodded. They were no longer victims of the night. They were hunters, and Count Dracula was running.